Let me request Mr. Dilip. Mr. Dilip is MD at Manipal Hospitals, where I request him to build in your perspectives from the healthcare delivery and how where it is going, role of innovation, and so on. So Dilip, thank you so much.
Thank you, Taslim Arif, and thank you, CIA, for putting together this session. When we talk about innovation, oftentimes it ends up being a conversation about technology, which is fair. That Vishal talked about the digital innovation that the pandemic forced on us, and the AI and other aspects of technology which is coming in. But in our context, particularly when we talk about India, can we look at maybe step back and broaden the canvas a little bit? That beyond technology, are there other facets of innovation that we should look at? So I just want to take 2 minutes to bring in a perspective. One is a regrettable feature of India's healthcare sector is the urban skew, that about 70% of our resources, whether it is people, infrastructure, or technology, is all in the urban areas. And like you said, Taslim, that about 30% of our population are left with any kind of healthcare coverage. So so how do we provide access to this forgotten, the 30% or the people in the rural areas? How do we offer access? And where affordability is concerned, how do we bring in that segment of people into the network, in the net of healthcare consumers? So when we talk about innovation, can we also bring in, while technology is great, can we bring in innovations about the processes? Can we talk about innovation in healthcare financing, which should make healthcare more equitable? One of the 6 points that you talked about, can we make healthcare more equitable? The second issue that I would want to flag is that it's an ecosystem that, we talk about healthcare being 1.5% of the GDP and so on and so forth. But with the population that we have, 1.3 billion, tertiary care is never going to be a solution. That, India is currently a tertiary care oriented market, that we are treating cancer, we are treating neuro issues, we are treating, diabetes or cardiovascular issues. So for our country, it is never going to be affordable. Whether the cost of treatment is borne by the patient or an insurance company or the government is a matter of accounting when we look at it from a country's perspective. It is a fact that the country can't afford to focus on tertiary healthcare. And therefore, we've been talking about preventive and promotive healthcare for the last 10 years or so. But we can't have preventive healthcare without safe drinking water. We can't have preventive healthcare without sanitation, nutrition, primary education, women's empowerment or women's employment. So when we talk about innovation in the healthcare space, do we look at the larger ecosystem of the healthcare space? And it need not be only hospital-based or health innovation in pharmaceuticals or drug delivery. I would only submit that a safe and efficient and cheap way of making water portable could be as important as a novel drug delivery mechanism. So, can we look at innovation not only from a technology lens, can we look at innovation from an ecosystem lens?
Thank you so much, Mr. Gip. Absolutely important points raised in terms of the, innovations in terms of delivery is a very important thing. And when people talk about innovation, including me, I think we largely see it from the, perspective of the technology innovation and so on. But in terms of better delivery, serving the best to the patient is also a very important component. And I think that would be something that we would love to hear more from you as we go forward. If I may come to Mr. Rajiv, your views from 3M and individually, how you see the future of healthcare happening? What would you like to begin in terms of going forward? What should we look at from 3M and your perspective?
Thanks, Taslim. Most of the people would not correlate 3M with the healthcare space. It's like an industrial company, but we have a formidable presence in the healthcare space, and we work in the whole eco-space of healthcare, starting from cutting-edge technology would be in terms of providing filtration systems in the biopharma for manufacturing molecules and vaccines, what we used in most of the current pandemic. Plus, we also work in the healthcare space, in the hospital space, or in the dental space to provide services to the patients, to the hospitals. One of the key areas what we work on is in infection prevention. Might seem like a very mundane topic in this whole discussion about innovation, but like Dilip said, we need to work at the grassroots level. We need to make sure that we are doing capability development and skill development for people to understand what their role is in the overall healthcare delivery. And then go to the next level where we can bring in innovative technologies to increase chair side time. Think about the supply demand gap what we have in the healthcare facility. Dilip again mentioned about the load being, the pressure being on the tertiary care centers. If we can drive patients to primary healthcare centers with proper infrastructure, will that reduce the load in the tertiary centers? That's what we need to do. And in that space, in the primary healthcare space, we work with Healthcare Sector Skills Council, we work with GE Healthcare, we collaborate with them in training the primary healthcare resources. Those are critical for us to bring in the technology in the tertiary centers which can help improve the processes. We also work in operating rooms. We work in the Central Sterile Services Department to improve the processes so that we can turn around patients faster. We can provide the services, ensure that the therapies are implemented properly, and then turn around patients so that we can create that whole space for bringing in more patients, treating more patients. Might be the innovation is not very visible because it's not product related, but it's, think about it, if we can turn around patients faster, we can have doctors, clinicians spend more time with the patients understanding what the therapy will work. That's where the whole innovation is happening. And that's what we are working in. We are ensuring that we are engaged with the customers. We listen to them, what they want, and then take it back to the drawing board to bring in technologies which can help them deliver that kind of services. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Raju. I think uh, the efforts that would go in terms of looking at what you rightly said, more engagement to ensure that the tertiary care load doesn't go fast. And that is a very important component that we'd like to come back and see how we would look at now healthcare delivery being distributed across the value chain and then cost accordingly to that. If I may request Kavita to come in. Kavita is leading one of the very exciting, early stage biotech called Zumator in immuno-oncology space. Kavita, from your perspective, innovations, now we're talking about possibly technology innovations again, from a startup and biotech perspective. If you can just, begin with your remarks on what you see as a future in the healthcare. Where do you see the opportunities to go forward and so on? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Tasleem. Thank you, CIF, for a convergence of sorts, if I may. I think the other panelists have focused on the outside-in approach of where we have seen from innovation at a grassroots level, what's happening in the country, the scope of what is. So let me give you another perspective. This is a bottom-up approach about drug discovery, drug development, manufacturing, scale, and therefore the reach that the others could have. So if you look at fundamental drug discovery and if you look at how the markets have kind of evolved, Pure Pharma looked at adoption of innovative molecules, and when I say innovation, those were drugs that were going off patent globally, and that was the biosimilar wave, I want to say, back in 2005 to 2012-13. But again, India was slightly late to catch up to that wave, but having done that, they've successfully onboarded a whole bunch of molecules that are doing phenomenally well, and I think that also kept pace with manufacturing in biopharma and not necessarily pharma. Once that happened, I think the whole catch-up game was passé. And what happened was the whole piece of, from the government side and from smaller hubs, which include CCAMP and the sorts, which were looking at what true innovation could bring. And that involved small molecule, large molecule, etc. And I come from a large molecule, protein drug discovery space, and I come from the oncology space. And I can tell you from experience from the previous startup that I did in biosimilars to this one, there's a sea change, not only from the investment side, but also from the government side of what deployment of capital is possible to do. From an oncology perspective of drug development, there's a lot to be done. There's a lot that can be done. And there's hubs of innovation globally. I believe in India, there is a very, very strong push to have very innovative drug molecules coming out of here. But the gap that I see is the lack or availability of capital. Just like all my colleagues spoke here about, kind of the expanse and the opportunity that it brings, there is very serious amount of capital that is required for any innovative R&D in biology to happen. I think COVID showed us that what a pandemic could have an onslaught and what drug development can do and how fast it could be done. Now that, the common man has an idea of the impact of, indigenous drug development in India, it takes a lot of capital to get there. And it takes very, very core teams to get there. And I think if the focus is there, and I can speak for oncology in specific, to get molecules to market, it's a longer journey. Drug development typically is a 6 to 12-year journey. I think that can be shortened. There is a huge gap which can be definitely shortened. And I think the focus has to be on hubs working along with biopharma to get this accelerated.
Thank you. Thank you, Kavita. So I think, friends, what we just got a quick view in terms of while one is developing globally competitive technologies in terms of new therapeutics, there are several components that impact them, including ecosystem, including the investments and so on. So I will come back to those questions, thanks. But largely while Kavita brought in the therapeutics perspective, drug discovery, biopharma, small molecules, well, the very important thing is also which actually have the cornerstone in terms of healthcare deliveries, medtech, the devices that we talk about, the other components which are built in with the healthcare delivery. And the advances on those actually has changed so many things over years. So if I may bring in Madan, who is leading Medtronic India, for his perspective on what does he see as the way healthcare moving forward and the role of innovations. That's Madan, over to you.
Thank you, Taslim, and Swagata. Good morning, everyone. I had a privilege of working more than 26 years. I call it almost 2 Vanvas in both developed and emerging markets in healthcare. So I've seen the likes of Sweden and US, South Korea market, South Africa, Turkey, Singapore, and the Southeast Asia countries. So I think when you look at all of that, some of those countries, the healthcare model may not be viable, as Vishal also mentioned. But we right now have a unique opportunity. We are at that cusp of a takeoff, GDP growing high, our penetration of technology being high. We are in this unique position. Together, we can make a big step change in healthcare delivery to provide access to millions and millions of people in India. So let me just unpack it, talking briefly about Medtronic and the technologies and what leading medical technology companies are doing. So we are the largest medical technology company, and about 3 billion of R&D is spent every year. And the clock speed of medical technology is much faster than pharma or other industries, because the material science changes, battery changes and all that will make that in 6 months a product is obsolete. So that is something to keep in mind. The other factor is that we look at product, procedure and platform innovation. These are the 3 lenses to look at. Now, 70 or 75 years ago, we introduced the first battery-powered pacemaker. That is the genesis of the company. But about 7 years ago, we have introduced a leadless pacemaker, which is the size of a vitamin capsule. So you don't need any leads, it can be implanted, even for elderly patients who cannot go through a surgical procedure. Similarly, artificial intelligence and technology are actually being deployed. In diabetes, which is a big area of burden for India, we have a new almost closed loop system where the system calibrates glucose level and calibrates how much of insulin should be provided. So it's almost close to the artificial pancreas level. So there are multiple examples of that. On the platform, like a aortic wall replacement where end-to-end support is provided to patient, multiple therapies where the patient can get discharged early, and on the platform part of it also, recently, deep brain stimulation. If you look at the awareness of deep brain stimulation that is possible in Parkinson's disease patients, even among doctors, it will be single-digit percentage. But we have now introduced a product where placement of electrodes can be made 5 times faster and accuracy is improved. So what I want to say out of all this is that India is not lagging behind any other country in availability of technology. India is also not lagging behind far too much in availability of trained manpower, especially at the metro towns. The challenges in tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, tier 5 is different. But we do have among the best clinicians in India. So what is holding us up? So we need to ensure that the health-seeking behavior is enhanced and we work together to create a trust in the system. You cannot be so cheap that you have to cut corners. We were the largest company in cardiac surgery 10, 15 years ago. Now the R&D spend and focus in India has reduced because the cost of reimbursement of a cardiac surgery, one of the complex procedures, is possibly less than ₹1,00,000. So that leads to a lot of reuse, 30 times, 40 times reuse of some of the components. So you kill a therapy, you kill outcomes. So I think all the technology, Taslim, what we need to do is that virtuous cycle, there is still an opportunity to create that virtuous cycle with clinicians, the qualified clinicians in India who are not behind anyone in the world, the technology that we have, and the spend from government. Brazil spends $50 per capita in medical technology. India spends $7. And Vishal's data was also showing that. Brazil is not US. US may be unviable, but Brazil has got all the structural and other problems that we have. So I think we need to reflect, are we keeping it too cheap that it will not become a respectable, viable industry? Or are we driving efficiency through use of adoption of technology? We have set up a big R&D center in Hyderabad, where even the software for our latest generation of pacemakers and robotic is done. So I think I'm hopeful. We work together as a society. We can make quantum jumps in this, but the trust and the health-seeking behavior has to be driven.
Thank you, Madan. If I may just, before I go on the second round, if I may just add to this, I think we heard from Mr. Bali very clearly the larger possibility of digital integration to the traditional healthcare providers. Very, very important thing, and something I just learned about possibly a week back. Just met a scientist possibly at UPenn, where they are building, and this would be exciting for all of us, they are building what you call it as a digital vaccine. If you have not followed it, I just wanted to bring it up. What is digital vaccine? They actually attempt to understand what is a vaccine. Vaccine is preparing your body to take care of the pathogen or infection when it comes. So you are priming it, and then whenever you have an exposure finally, your body reacts to it and take care of the pathogen so that you do not have the severe indication. That's what it is. Digital vaccine, what they have done is they have taken all the vaccine clinical trial data and understood that what is the change that body is doing regardless for being prepared. And that is what they have been trying to do is now have, the neuromodulation, as one says. How do you actually modulate your brain to respond and get prepared without any exposure for vaccine as a molecular exposure to that? So your body can be now, if you say that I want to have a monkeypox vaccine, you do not need to prepare it in the BSL-2, BSL-3 labs. What their approach, and it's very exciting, is that you understand what are the pathways in your physiological system. Just activate that pathway, which would then you are prepared for that happening. And this is phenomenal. It is a blue sky approach, but something that in terms of future of healthcare would be phenomenal in terms of digital health as a larger thing. But if I may just come back, when people talk about, like me, go on talking about this innovation and technological innovation, I'm sure there is a thought at the healthcare delivery, such a leading hospital, Manipal, you would be saying that while you talk about this blue sky 50 years down the line, 40 years down the line, there are gaps right now. You have to build something that we need. You have to build something from the context of healthcare delivery in hospitals. So if you can bring up that perspective.
Yeah, Taslim, that's exactly what I was planning to say. That I know it is a technology audience, and Kavita is there and Madan is there. One practical experience I have working with a lot of startups and innovation agents, if you can call that, approach platforms like Manipal. One concern or one trouble or one issue they have is, they don't have a platform to experiment their ideas on. And the response that we normally have is that the problem statements that they pick to work on, while it needs to be futuristic, but at times it is so far out there into the future, we are skipping several steps in between that, So as a delivery organization. As a healthcare provider, like you said, we have concerns about this decade, next decade, maybe the decade after that. So something which is going to address an issue maybe 3 decades down the line may not be a priority for us to engage with. The second aspect is, again, as a healthcare provider, one concern that we will always have is safety and the perception of our patients about are we experimenting on them. So if the startup ecosystem can interact with the provider kind of a platforms as they choose an area to work with, maybe some of these issues could be resolved. That we don't pick up something too esoteric. I'm not trying to dampen the enthusiasm of the startup environment. What I'm trying to say is maybe we could collaborate in identifying areas which are relevant. The second point I would want to make is, I don't know if Kamal of Volvo is here, Kamal Bali, because Volvo is not the name that you would immediately think of in the context of healthcare, right? But then Kamal is leading a consortium, we are part of it, which fosters innovation. And one of the areas they are working on is healthcare. And what Kamal is working together with us is that how do we transport patients in an emergency in a quick and efficient and intelligent manner to the hospital? You would remember the conversation the healthcare lounge, the speaker lounge this morning, that how long it takes to move across the town in Bangalore. So Volvo's looking at transportation, and it is integral to the ecosystem that we are talking about. So therefore, the innovation need not be left to drug delivery or hospitals or medical devices. I think the larger ecosystem, anybody in the economy could be part of that, because what we are trying to solve is the country's issue, and we have to be contextual to what India is facing now.
Absolutely. Thank you. No, thank you, Mr. Dilip, on that. I completely agree with you that there are so many opportunities around us. The best thing has happened, to be honest, is that the importance of healthcare and understanding of the system has actually percolated down to people who are not daily involved in the healthcare services or delivery. And that is a very important thing to buy in. 2-3 days back, I was reading an article in the Hindu on, the research and innovation literacy. And the literacy, when it's not only about the community, but literacy at large. So as a society, as a community, we actually push that further. If we lose out on lay person or a common person who is on the ground, not involved in this, if we lose out their attention, I think anything cannot take that exponential curve if the larger literacy is not in. So a completely contextual agreement for innovators from even large companies to see what are the needs, in what shape and form the needs are, and build on that. So if I may, thank you so much. If I may go to Rajiv. Rajiv, I remember we briefly talked about, while hospital-based healthcare delivery is one, we all know now slowly and steadily that we are going towards home healthcare in a way. It could be preventative, it could be screening, but possibly it may go into therapeutic as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Thanks, Taslim. So 3M has been working on wound management for the last few years. And what we see is one of the, India, everyone knows, is a diabetic capital for the world. And most of the issues with diabetic patients is it leads to ulcers, diabetic foot ulcers, and amputation can be the end point of that. Now, most of it happens because of improper screening as well as improper treatment and monitoring of the wounds post the treatment is done. What we have done is, so to answer to what Dilip was talking about again, we are creating a wound care certification program for the nurses who are not aware of the overall therapy today. So, and that is not understood as a therapy in the hospitals. Right now, it's limited to certain clinicians and certain hospitals to provide, rather than becoming a norm in the hospitals. So we are creating that whole training system with healthcare sector skill council. We are creating these trainers who would then form a pool of people to train the larger set of nurses across India. Once that happens, and the therapy is such that you can get the instrument or the equipment, you can take it home for the treatment of your ulcers. It sends messages to the clinician on a regular basis. That's where the artificial intelligence has been built up on what the wound is like, what is the therapy, whether it's working or not, the cleaning of the wound is happening on a regular period or not, and whether the patient is following the therapy or not. If he takes off the equipment, the clinician will get a signal back saying that the patient is not working or not. Now, what happens is, what the patient was earlier coming to a tertiary center again and again, that can be avoided. Rather than treating the person in the facility, the tertiary facility, the treatment, the wound cleaning or the dressing can be done. The patient can be sent back home. The monitoring of the wound therapy can be done online. And whenever the patient requires a therapy, then the doctor can call and say that this therapy, you need to come back in the OPD and get the treatment done rather than going in the OT. Now that's where the innovation is happening. You are trying to, like we talked about, reduce the load on the tertiary centers so that they can do more elective surgeries like cardiac surgeries or orthopedic surgeries, which can't be done at home or can't be done at the primary healthcare center. That's where the innovation is happening. So we are innovating in terms of the whole capability development, as well as bringing in product innovations which can help reduce the load, as well as create that sort of ecosystem where home healthcare becomes possible and the load goes down on the tertiary care centers.
Thank you so much, Rajiv. Thank you. I think this segment, if I may just kind of put my quick comment on that, this could be a huge segment of healthcare delivery, which is we are going to see in next 10 years, 20 years down the line, that people will be able to most of individually, but I think enabling them to do that with a kind of a anchoring in terms of healthcare service system, traditional service system and so on will be the way to go. And just to share with you an example, the way things are, India may have a huge opportunity because it has a very deep, dire need to build that up because we are not able to reach. So this is where the reach could happen, where the connections with the experts, connection with the data center connection, others would come in, and home healthcare can become humongously, inflection point growth that we can take it from there. Absolutely, very, very important, something that we should look at going forward, how we are doing it. If I may come to Kavita, and I'll request you this time to represent the larger startup, biotech startup community, where we all know, we all hear about it. We are right now hearing that US biotech scenario itself is going through a churn in itself. But in India, where do you see, because when you are building in India, according to me, the good thing that you have, your ears are on the ground in terms of what is needed. So where is the possibility of that contribution back to the system from a biotech perspective? What are the challenges? Where do you see us innovations, biotech innovations going in a few years down the line?
Sure, thanks. So I'm used to being the oddball in the game, given from the larger healthcare perspective. And when it comes to fundamental R&D, and I want to differentiate this from pharma, biopharma, and R&D, and these are three different sectors. Especially in oncology, immuno-oncology, where I come from, we're probably only 4 or 5 companies in India doing what we do, and possibly 20 odd companies in the world doing what we do. Now, this is not standalone. There are multiple other, my friend here would like to say esoteric chances, but then these are unique chances that we take. There's a lot of sunk money, and there is a hope that such drugs would work. But this is the fascinating piece of R&D, and therefore it comes down to how much money is available for fundamental R&D. The translational pieces are already spoken about here. The fundamental pieces are how do you get such a drug to regulatory pieces and therefore to market. I think in India, what's been happening and evolving is 2 pieces, the government getting involved at multiple levels, whether it be chapters by means of funds, grants, etc., that are coming in at various levels. But the second, which is a very important part, and which I think is important here in this context, is the VC community coming in. Serious capital is required. You can't, pray and spray here hoping that something would work. In the US, if you consider, let's say, evolved markets in oncology, there are very serious oncology investors who come in, stay the game, look at regulatory approvals, and launch. And you've seen it across what Pfizer, Merck, etc. are doing. In India, you have seen it in the pharma space, not necessarily in the biotech space. In biotech, there has been, of course, in the biosimilars, but in novel oncology, whether it be small molecules or large molecules, it's just taking off. It needs to take off in a more exponential pace, and I think the key contributors would be, kind of the industry R&D kind of meet up and the VC is getting educated. There is a lot of money out here. Even though it might be the funding winter of our times in the US with recessions, etc., there is money availability. There needs to be focused capital in biotech and therefore also focus in who these VCs or CVCs hire to judge who are the capable people to do biotech. I think that would make a huge difference in the space.
Thank you. Thank you, Kavita. Just to give you a perspective, friends, immuno-oncology is absolutely one of the most exciting options in front of us as we speak for cancer. While in last 20, 30 years, we have been able to move from cancer, which is completely a fatal condition to get into, we have actually seen a significant movement of technologies and science to make sure that it's manageable, it's treatable, in most cases, not all, but most cases. This is very good. However, God forbid, if things happen to a person, they actually go through a phenomenally burden-ridden treatment, which is not easy to go through. You have chemotherapies of the world, you have other MABs of the world, but the immuno-oncology, which is empowering your body to take care of the cancer itself, is a really exciting phenomena right now at the world stage. And just wanted to give you a perspective, I want to close it by this line. In Bangalore, we have 5 to 6 such innovations happening, which is in immuno-oncology. We have Zumitor, we have Immunil, we have 3, 4 recent startups at CCAM, which possibly would make Bangalore itself a larger leader in terms of addressing cancer per se. And we have fantastic hospitals, right, which are dedicated hospitals, with Manipal being there, then you have HCG, then you have Kidwise, and so on and so forth. The good thing is that they are participating together in terms of the cells, in terms of autologous, in terms of allogenic work that they're doing. So this is really very, very exciting space, and I just wanted to bring that perspective forward. And their need for the investments, their need for the support from the ecosystem, their support from the government to ensure that those things actually, which are risky, can get support as well. So thank you for that, Kavita. Coming to you, Madan. So we are possibly 11 minutes to go before this session ends. The last 10 minutes, we are going to keep for question answers. So please do keep your question answers ready. I'm running out of my questions, so that's why I'm going to rely on you to ask questions. But Madan, from a perspective of such a large global medtech company, there are so many things happening. While you have spoken about the other component, where do you see the early detection, the screening, the diagnostics, which will possibly prevent the late stage load when the disease conditions are bad? How do we see that early? And from Medtronic perspective, what opportunities we are seeing for a global company as well as innovations happening out of India?
Yeah, certainly. So when I came to India, Dr. Mufassal Lakadawala, accomplished surgeon in Mumbai, told me, Madan, the car I drive needs insurance, but I don't need to have an insurance. I think it sums up the situation in India. Correct? We have to work to ensure that the out-of-pocket expenditure are managed through insurance and a greater spend from the government. So if you look at major global transnational companies, India represents less than 2% for many of them. And we have 17, 18% of global population. So that is a disconnect. We cannot just close our eyes and say we are very good and all that. We have to be humble. 18% of population, 2% of medtech market is definitely an evidence that we are not getting access to millions and millions of patients. So I think the pathway management, gatekeeping you mentioned are extremely valuable, and the digital can play a key part. I'll give an example from Korea. Korea, developed country, and our adoption of technology is excellent. Almost 90% of procedures are done in a minimally invasive manner. Here, possibly the other way around. They have a formal checkup for every working adult and the families almost every year. So the conditions are identified early, and the right therapy management is put in place. And they put a lot of effort on educating people on conditions. Here, I know there are fringe players who might be doing irrational use of therapies and products, but reputed companies like Manipal here, we have in the room here, Dilip. There are institutions of repute who have got NABA, JC accreditation, whose protocols are very good. So as a society, CII can take a lead with FICCI and others to say how do we create that credibility and trust in the industry and healthcare so that people, the protocol are there, irrational use is not there, and people don't go to second opinion and stop doing it. Just 2 weeks ago, there was a case my team was telling. A patient had sudden cardiac arrest related aspects. He was revived, and the doctor treating him in a large hospital told him that he needs a ICD, a defibrillator inside. He went to the village, talked to some other doctor. Doctor said, no, you don't need anything. He had a repeat incident which would have killed him, but he went right to the hospital and got it done. So I think there are a lot of internal dynamics among the medical community also. The best way is for public to spend more effort and money to ensure that the trust in the healthcare system is improved significantly. And together we need to do it. We have to do it as civic society.
Thank you, Madan. I think if I take the last component of what he said, the trust in the system is very, very important, and that calls for an engagement, all around comprehensive engagement to ensure that all stakeholders are equally participating and they have ownership on what we want to do together, and that requires a dedicated one, and something we should build upon. So before we close on the aspects from here, and I hope there are questions, I really, really hope there are questions that, you have a phenomenal panel here. But while the questions come, I want each panelist to possibly give me 2 points in terms of future of healthcare globally and India, very, very quickly. So if I may start from Kavita, what would you think? 2 points, very quickly.
I think with India's economy growing as it is, and in the future of healthcare, there has to be a phenomenal spend in fundamental R&D, just like there is a phenomenal gain by having institutes that are there in biotech.
Thanks. For building world-class innovations, you need that kind of investments as well, and that is one thing that you are saying that we as a community need to drive it. Mr. Dilip?
I think in the Indian context, Taslim, it has to be about universal access and universal healthcare. And that's so, Vishal talked about healthcare as a driver for economic development. And without universal healthcare, that's not going to happen.
So universal healthcare is a very important component, Mr. Dilip is saying. If I go to you, Madan?
I would concur. Universal healthcare supported by insurance and a higher government spend. We have to reach 2.5–3% at least. And also, we have to work much more money on training and awareness building.
Very important point. I think while those things happen, can there be technological innovations which can support it? Either finance level, capacity building level, and many other aspects. To you, Rajiv?
I would say a balance between futuristic technologies and the leverage, while working on the grassroots levels to improve the capability so that we can leverage the technologies which come in. And the other thing would be to reduce the loads on the tertiary centers and move that care to primary so that we can do more effective care at the front line of the people, like tier 2, tier 3 cities where the healthcare access is not there. That's where we need to bring in the healthcare so that we reduce the load on the tertiary centers. That would be my message.
I think that has resonated again. Thank you so much, Rajiv. What Rajiv possibly said, it's a balance between today's need and building innovations for tomorrow's need. I think there has to be balance between the two. So thank you so much. Can we now go to questions? If somebody can help me, yeah. We'll have 5 minutes, so please do have your questions. We'll go, I saw him first, and I'll come to you second. Thank you.
Sir, you mentioned about digital
Can
vaccine.
you, if you can, please identify yourselves and then ask a question to a panelist.
I'm Vijay Kumar, I'm from the government.
Uh-huh.
Sir, you mentioned about digital vaccine. How do you administer digital vaccine? Is it as effective as taking the actual vaccine? Point number 2, kindly give your perspectives on digital health and privacy issues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I can take the first one. I'll see if my panelists want to say the digital privacy from a healthcare perspective. So I'll just do a very quick one. This is an early start. This is a new era that people are attempting to do, how we can actually do the neuromodulation to deliver it. The efficacy hasn't been established yet. So it's in early days. I was saying that how futuristic we would be able to do, but happy to keep you posted if need be and see how. So the phase 2 or as trials are just starting, I'll be happy to update you on that. In terms of digital privacy, anybody wants to take it?
See, the way the mic is getting passed on, I think nobody wants to talk about digital privacy, but I would just attempt to say that it is still upcoming concern, so that, we have to be mindful of the privacy requirements of the patients, but then we have to also balance it with using the data for future. We talk about, the epidemiology data or the patient's data. How do we use it for betterment of healthcare in research, or, we talked about predictive analysis which could come in. It has to be a balance. Right now, we have moved quite a bit to the privacy side, but I think we have to take a collective view on what is best for the country.
Thank you. So if you have a question there, please go
Yes,
ahead, and we'll come to you after that. Yeah.
I would like to ask this question more as an expert patient. I've been under doctor's knife and treatment for a
Can
long
you be a
period
bit
of time.
louder?
I consider myself as an expert patient. So the perspective I would like to bring is are simple molecules like the antibiotic pentate, are they being relegated, especially when we are talking of resistance to drug treatment? That is one of the things, like in rural India, people are very simple, so they respond to maybe a simpler medication than the most advanced, or maybe. This is the question: how the medical institution, or how they are going to be looking at these old medications.
So if I heard you and understood your question, largely you're saying that there is as we all know, there's a larger phenomena where, in a way, we somehow get an infection, a bacteria or otherwise, which would not respond to most of the antibiotic. This is a phenomena is called antimicrobial resistance, which we all know. And I think your question was, that how medical fraternity is looking at it in terms of use of it?
A simpler medication like pentate,
Correct.
the basic penicillin.
So I think I'll let anybody wants to look at it. Yeah.
I don't come from the small molecule world, but let me attempt this. I think the context of what we are saying is disease perspective is classified in multiple ways. When it comes to diseases that can be handled with simpler medication, well, you talk about something as simple as Dolo, right? Which can be all about management. But if you look at therapy and the way therapies are moving, there are higher end therapies, of course, and they're looking at targeted therapies. There is, of course, a lot of usage in this AMR, which is antimicrobial drug resistance, which is in vogue. I think what we are trying to do from an R&D perspective is to look at not from the usage being curbed, but what it is from drug development that we can do so that we address antimicrobial drug resistance. I cannot speak for usage for sure.
Thank you. You want to add something?
Yeah. Sir, if I could give a quick perspective why urban areas see that. One is self-medication, that, how many of us in this room would medicate ourselves without going to a doctor? A sore throat, and we start taking an azithromycin, right? After a couple of rounds, it stops working. I think self-medication's got a significant role to play in the drug resistance that you talked.
Thank you for jumping.
Yeah, I just had a, yeah, I have the mic here.
Sorry, I couldn't
Yeah.
see. Okay, go ahead.
Tiago Valiappa, founder of Sonam Medical College of Naturopathy and Yoga. So I think all of you touched upon a lot of important points, which is more today. But then the history has it that historic heritage medicine today is pulled out a lot of people out of various pandemic and issues of viruses. So do you think the time has come, as we talk about Make in India and Naturopathy and Yoga is a Make in India. So you think there's a way that you could work together as one and not compete, but then, surgeries are certainly something which can be done by the advanced medicines. But then I think ma'am mentioned about Dolo and things like that. So there's various ways that one could create a heritage medicine, and this would mean that you would give jobs to millions of people because you would have the back end supporting it as well.
Yeah. No, thank you for your question. Anybody wants to quickly respond? Or shall I? Yeah, please go ahead.
So I think preventive is the key part, correct? And even government is also prioritizing preventive healthcare. And I think what we are considering is that even the diagnosis is happening so late. So preventive is definitely the best, but as lifestyle changes and the modern way of living and working and related aspects come in, there is always a segment of people who would need interventional or other therapy. The idea is that in that segment, you give therapies which are curative, not just palliative. But I would fully agree with an integrated approach in that sense.
Hello, sir.
Hi, my name is Krishnan with a research think tank called Itihasa Research and Digital. Question is, what are your thoughts about this UHI? The Unified Health Interface, will it be as successful as UPI? And are there any perspectives from an insurance perspective that you see? Thank you.
I think we just spoke in the speaker's launch, so I'll let anybody of them take a stab.
So there is a lot of work happening on that. Means like UPI, we need to first understand the data. There's a lot of data out there in the open. We need to analyze that and understand what do we want to do. Is it we want to reduce the cost, or we want to improve the therapy, or we want to create a system which can provide healthcare access to all the people? There's a lot of work happening with the National Digital Health Mission. The government they have already launched the Aadhaar card. They want to do it. The infrastructure which is required and the processes which we need to put in place, that'll take time. You can't rush into it. So like UPI took time, we need to integrate it to the Indian healthcare space, Indian data which is there, and customize the requirement as per the Indian healthcare space. It will happen. It's something which you can see now. We have to put the foundation blocks in place. It will happen.
Hello,
Thank
sir.
you. Thank you. We have a question for one last question.
Hello, sir.
We'll come to you. You want to answer?
So on UPI, just one quick input. India has got about 19 lakh hospital beds and about 12 lakhs is in the private sector. The organized corporate hospital network, such as Manipal, if you consider that, all that put together is only about 2 lakh beds. The remaining 10 lakh beds, which forms the backbone of India's healthcare delivery, are the 30, 40, 50 bedded nursing homes. So the technology that we talk about, unlike UPI, this would have to embrace all these smaller units and nursing homes and all that. Otherwise, we would not get the impact that you're hoping.
Thank you. This would be the last question for now, so
Hello,
that
sir.
the next session doesn't get delayed.
This is Durgadas, and I'm the director and CTO of Rhymesophic Technologies. We work with the large mental health and behavioral health facilities out of US. So if you look at, there's a lot of mental and behavioral issues that's happening in India. So this question is more to Mr. Dilip. How is Manipal tackling this mental and behavioral health, and what innovative ways you are coming up with in India? That is one question. And second question is Manipal also taking care of privacy issues like HIPAA, what we have in the US? Thank you.
On a lighter vein, mental health question getting addressed to me is a bit of a pointer to me. So on the privacy issue, sir, that Manipal is HIPAA certified, and of course we take it very, very seriously. And our data is in our control. We don't share it with anybody. And privacy is, we use a world-class HIS system, so it is not a concern. Mental health is absolutely, on a serious note, it has come to really the forefront, maybe post-pandemic, along with other issues that Vishal talked about. And unfortunately, the organized healthcare delivery system, whom I would represent, is not really focused towards mental health. It is still an evolving subject. There is still taboo about talking about it, people approaching doctors. I think, like I said originally, we as a country are focused towards tertiary healthcare delivery. Cardiac issues, orthopedics, neurosurgery, ICU, softer issues like maybe perceived to be softer issues like mental health is not getting the attention that it deserves. So we are guilty, and as Manipal, and maybe we are guilty as a sector not to give it the importance that it deserves.
Thank you so much, Dilip. If I may possibly come to quickly summarize, I think we had a fantastic session. Very well, build the context by Mr. Vishal Wali with the views on global views on the healthcare, how the healthcare investments are going, what is the future, digital integration, very important component we all have. And then we had perspectives from a drug discovery, from a healthcare delivery aspects, and then the corporate view in terms of building medtech innovations, which are going to be the center stage and will take the healthcare space and the delivery to the next level. So please join me in thanking this very, very solid